Welcome to today's hearing of the CMT Subcommittee, and I'm pleased to welcome our witnesses and my good friend Mr. Whitfield, the Chairman of Energy and Power Subcommittee and sponsor of this legislation that we're going to discuss today. Throughout my life, I've admired horses. I remember fondly riding horses at my grandpa's place in Colorado. I also put myself through 2 years of college and law school working at Exarban Racetrack and have quite an affinity for the thoroughbreds. Now, Congressman Whitfield's legislation, the Prevent All Soaring Tactics Act, amends various parts of the Horse Protection Act of 1970 and 1976. H.R. 1518 bans the use of all action devices, weighted shoes, pads, hoof bands, and other devices which alter the horse's gait. This legislation would also change the current self-governing framework where the horse industry organizations train and appoint inspectors for shows and exhibits with some oversight by the Animal and Plant Health Service, an agency of the Department of Agriculture. Now, H.R. 1518 would direct the Secretary of Agriculture to promote new regulations under which USDA would take over the licensing, training, assigning, and overseeing of these inspectors. I look forward today to an exchange of ideas reflecting multiple viewpoints on this legislation. No law is ever perfect, and often Congress needs to act in order to modernize, clarify, or reduce burdens. I have no doubt that there are issues within the HPA that need to be addressed. However, I believe that when Congress is considering legislation that adds new layers of regulations to an industry, we must be precise and careful. This means narrowly tailoring this legislation to fit the specific problem that needs to be addressed. I want to thank everyone again for being here and traveling. I know several of you have come a long ways. We have a government official from Tennessee, Commissioner Julius Johnson, Tennessee's Commissioner of Agriculture here. And pursuant to our traditional protocols, government officials get to testify first. And what we'll do is we'll go from your right, my left, down the panel, and we'll discuss those rules when we get there. Since the Vice Chairman isn't here, does anyone other than Ed and Marcia want 2 minutes? Seeing none, I yield back my time, and now yield your 5 minutes to our ranking member, Jan Schakowsky.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this hearing, and I want to welcome all the witnesses for consideration of H.R. 1518, sponsored by my good friend Ed Whitfield, the PAST Act, Prevent All Soaring Tactics. I am a previous horse owner. In addition to learning how to ride and jump a little, wasn't very good at it. My horse was better at it than I was. I learned how to keep him healthy and sound. We're dealing today with Tennessee walking horses who have been known historically for their distinctive gait, but evidence continues to emerge that too often these wonderful horses are trained through inhumane and really torturous treatment, especially for high-stakes competitions. We're going to see a video, a very disturbing video after I finish. It's short, 2 minutes and some 50 seconds, but what we'll see are tactics that absolutely need to be stopped. The Horse Protection Act in 1970 was designed to eradicate the practice of soaring. You will see this, the soaring of the feet of the horses. Unfortunately, the Horse Protection Act enforcement is lax, and the industry's self-policing has been largely ineffective in eliminating the practice. And so this legislation makes sense. In fact, as of today, it is co-sponsored by 223 members, well over a majority in the House of Representatives. We need to make sure that we really are protecting horses. That's what the PAST bill does. And I hope this video will make it very clear. This is ABC Nightline, a very short clip of it. If you could play that, please. It's part of my testimony.
to believe such cruelty could be possible. Kentucky has its derby, but Tennessee has its famed walking horses. With their high-stepping gait, a warning. For some, this video will be disturbing to watch, but without seeing it, it would be hard to believe such cruelty could be possible. Kentucky has its derby, but Tennessee has its famed walking horses. With their high-stepping gait, originally trained so plantation owners could have a smooth ride as they surveyed their property. But now lots of money is at stake, with millions of dollars in stud fees for a winning horse at the annual championship called the Celebration.
1389.
Competition is fierce, and for years there's been great suspicion in the horse world about just how some top trainers get their horses to produce what is called the big lick.
It's a stride, it's a lick, it's a gait. It's not something that any horse does naturally. This is a totally artificially man-made, created gait.
And now there's proof of what some trainers are doing behind the scenes in Tennessee's beautiful horse country. Down this gravel road, caught on tape in this barn. Undercover video being seen for the first time tonight. Made by an investigator for the Humane Society, who went to work for one of the leading figures in an American tradition gone awry, Jackie McConnell, seen here beating a horse. Keith Dane of the Humane Society described what is known as soring, creating painful sores on the horse's front ankles.
They'll apply drops of either mustard oil, croton oil, diesel fuel, even hand cleaners that have an abrasive or caustic effect to them.
Right on the horse's
right on the ankle. And then they will wrap it with a plastic wrap, and that will cause the chemicals to essentially cook or seep into the skin and the flesh of the horse, making it very tender.
Then later, the video shows McConnell and his stable hands putting heavy metal chains around the open sores.
Then when the horse is ridden, the chain hits that pastern, causing pain and causing that sort of flinch or opposite reaction.
So it's a flinch? Is that what we're really seeing?
Essentially, yes. The horse is responding in pain and picking up their feet.
Is this widespread? Do other trainers do this same thing? Have they been doing it for years?
I can't speak about years before, but I do not believe that goes on now. I do not believe that is rampant.
But at last year's championship celebration, in a random inspection, federal agents found foreign substances in swabs on the legs of 52 of 52 horses tested. Jackie McConnell's lawyer says McConnell will go to court next week in Chattanooga to plead guilty to one of the counts on which he was indicted. And late today, we heard from one of the big corporate sponsors of the Tennessee Walking Horse Championship, Pepsi, which said it has now severed its ties with the event as a result of our ABC News investigation.
And I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I will yield 2.5 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to welcome Commissioner Johnson and appreciate him being here. I think that we all agree that the soring of horses in any form is it's objectionable on every level, and for good reason. Soring is illegal. And you're going to hear from Commissioner Johnson. The state of Tennessee has zero tolerance for those who knowingly commit violations and have worked diligently with industry leaders to curb the practices. In fact, according to the most recent data from USDA, the compliance rate for shows this year has been over 96%, with less than 4% of the nearly 10,000 inspections resulted in some sort of SOAR violation. Accordingly, the USDA, this is their compliance rate for the horse industry organization affiliated Tennessee Walking Horses shows was 98.5% over the period 2009 to 2012. So why is additional legislation necessary for an industry that is over 98% compliant? Now, let's compare this to the thoroughbred racing industry, which is in our neighboring state of Kentucky, in which one report found that 3,000 horses died between 2009 and 11. During the same period, one horse participating in a Tennessee walking horse show event died. Based on conversations I've had with breeders in Tennessee, enacting the bill before us would potentially eliminate an entire division of horse breed and result in the loss of thousands of jobs in Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Texas, North Carolina, Virginia, Texas, and Mississippi. They're all connected with the industry. The economic impact of the walking horse industry in Tennessee is $1.5 billion. The Celebration Show in Shelbyville, Tennessee brings in over $40 million to that community. This legislation imposes excessive regulatory burdens on the walking horse industry and could potentially eliminate the entire industry and thus the entire breed. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield.
Recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank the gentlelady very much for yielding, and I appreciate Chairman Terry and Ms. Schakowsky having this hearing today. As has been said, the Horse Protection Act was passed by Congress in 1970 to stop the practice of soring. The only breeds being sored today are the Tennessee walking horses, the spotted saddle, and racking. The U.S. Department of Agriculture Inspector General report issued a few years ago has concluded that the current program for inspecting horses for soring is not adequate to ensure that these animals are not being abused. The DQPs being hired by the HIOs have a clear conflict of interest and do not properly enforce the Horse Protection Act. Many in the horse show industry do not regard the abuse of horses as a problem. And when USDA inspectors conduct their few inspections, they are subjected to intimidation and harassment and must routinely bring law enforcement for protection. USDA has recommended that the DQP program be abolished and independent accredited veterinarians perform inspections at sanctioned shows. H.R. 1518 that adopts that recommendation and makes it more difficult to soar and use devices to alter the horse's natural gait. This bill has widespread support, including 42 horse organizations, including the American Horse Council. It has all 50 state veterinary medical associations, the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and 223 members of Congress are co-sponsors. We're going to hear testimony today about the show entity in the Shelbyville, Tennessee area being 98.5% compliant. We're also going to hear other witnesses disagree with that, and we're going to tell you why they disagree with it. I feel bad that we would not have this problem today in the industry except for a few areas around Shelbyville, Tennessee, a few areas in Missouri, and yes, a few areas in Kentucky. And that's why later on we're going to find out why the inspector organizations in Tennessee and in Missouri and in Kentucky have been notified by the Department of Agriculture that they're going to be decertified. They're not there yet. But I look forward to the hearing and the information that we'll learn from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. And now it's time for the show, which is hearing from our witnesses on H.R. 1518. And I'm going to introduce the witnesses now, and then when I'm finished with that, we'll start with Mr. Johnson. Each of you have 5 minutes. There's a little, well, I see one in front of Ms. Benefield and one behind us. It's green, means you're good to go. When it starts to get yellow, or when it's yellow, that means start wrapping it up. In red, I'm going to probably interject and have you wrap up at that point. So we have a really fantastic panel with us today. We have the Honorable Julius Johnson, Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. Then Marty Irby, International Director and former President, Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders and Exhibitors Association. We have Mr. Ron DeHaven, a DMV, Executive Vice President and CEO of American Veterinary Medical Association, former Administrator, USDA Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. Thank you for being here. Mr. John Bennett, DMV, Equine Services, LLC, on behalf of the Performance Show Horse Association. Donna Benefield, International Walking Horse Association. Then Teresa Bippen, President, Friends of Sound Horses. And last to testify, James Hickey, Jr., President, American Horse Council. So at this time, I want to recognize the Honorable Julius Johnson for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate this opportunity. I'm going to stick to my statement and be very brief at the same time. As Commissioner of the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, I appreciate you allowing me to provide testimony on the importance of the equine industry, and especially the Tennessee walking horse industry, to our state. The equine industry is an important part of Tennessee's economy and its heritage. We are ranked among the top 6 states in the nation in the number of equine according to the latest Census of Agriculture. Our Market Development Division within the department helps to support this growing industry through promotion of Tennessee trails, shows, and events, and through involvement with numerous breed associations. Tennessee is home to several national breed associations in addition to the Tennessee walking horse. Some facts about Tennessee's equine industry are: a 2010 survey indicated 170,000 head, but a more comprehensive survey in 2004 indicated 240,000 head in Tennessee. We believe the numbers have not declined, but rather the variation is more due to the tactics in which the survey was taken. There are 41,000 Tennessee farms with horses. 41,000. There are 3.2 million acres, 30% of Tennessee's farmland designated to equine uses. So you can see this industry as a whole is very important to our state agricultural industry. The total economic impact from the equine industry in Tennessee is $1.4 billion. The total value added impact of equine in Tennessee is $746 million. The indirect business tax revenue received by state and local governments is $61.2 million. And the total estimated economic impact from the horse shows and events is $45 million. The importance of the industry to the many local and rural community charities, which they organize these activities, and other organizations, is tremendously significant. It's going to be a major hit to rural Tennessee. The industry creates 20,309 jobs throughout our state, and again, especially in rural Tennessee, which is so hard-pressed to attract any jobs, and it's more meaningful there than any other place, and we simply will be devastated with the loss of this kind of jobs. The Tennessee Department of Agriculture and I personally find the soaring of horses in any shape, form, or objectionable on every level. There should be no tolerance for animal cruelty. Walking horse industry leaders have made what we believe are monumental strides at eliminating this practice from the industry. And we believe they are committed to a policy of zero tolerance for individuals who commit violations. We understand the motives of some to further tighten the regulation of the industry in order to protect the horse. However, we caution against overreaction by some who seek to eliminate horse shows at the expense of rural communities across the state and horse owners, the vast majority of whom are caring and responsible in the management of their animals. Rural Tennessee would suffer the greatest as a result of this type of legislation. We urge this committee and Congress to find the right balance that protects the horse as well as ensures the viability of the walking horse industry should you find it necessary to pass any legislation at all. The Tennessee walking horse is a wonderful, dynamic breed that has been the enjoyment of many around the world for its ride, its gentleness, and its endurance. We believe Congressman Whitfield's proposed legislation is based more on perception than on sound science. We believe it is excessive and will damage the industry significantly and potentially eliminate the performance horse altogether. I urge you to find sensible solutions to this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. At this time, Mr. Irby, you are recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Schakowsky, and other members. My name is Marty Irby, and I served as the president of the Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders and Exhibitors Association from December of 2010 until December of 2012, and currently serve as an international director. But today I'm here representing myself. In addition, last night I was informed that I've been selected as the nominated president for 2014 of the association. I have owned Racking Horse World Grand Champions and have judged the Spotted Saddle Horse World Grand Championship. All three of these breeds are affected by this legislation that I fully support. In 1955, my grandfather, Veterinarian, obtained his first Tennessee walking horse and joined the association I later became president of. At the age of 3, I was first placed on a Tennessee walking horse, and at the age of 5, I first began competing in World Grand Championship competitions. Since childhood, I have observed the horrific practice of soaring, and my father taught me how to soar a horse at the age of 13. Soaring padded performance horses is ingrained within our culture. From my personal and public stance, I have suffered many losses. Even family members have turned against me. I ask that you not let these efforts be in vain. I am here to prevent the extinction of the Tennessee walking horse, and I believe this bill must pass the House of Representatives and Senate. I have seen horses' feet in the past on many occasions look like pizza with the cheese pulled off the top of it. That's how horrific this practice is. I have listened to thousands of people, breeders, trainers, exhibitors, and owners, who want change within our industry. Poll after poll continued to show that the majority favored this bill. During my 8 years of service in various positions, I tried to move forward and move our breed in a new direction from within, and was unsuccessful with my attempts. Therefore, I am here before you today to ask Congress to please help save our breed. Other breeds may be doing well in Tennessee, and their numbers may be good, but the Tennessee walking horse is not doing well. Over the past 10 years, our membership has declined from more than 20,000 to 8,300 or less. In 2006, when I was an international director, we failed to crown a World Grand Champion because most of the horses were disqualified and deemed sore and in violation of the Horse Protection Act by the United States Department of Agriculture. In 2010, when I served as Vice President of Marketing, we were kicked out of the World Equestrian Games in Kentucky, and our $25,000 sponsorship check was returned due to the soaring issues and utilization of stacks and chains. Our greatest fault for many decades as a breed is that we have been trying to save the padded performance horse. Recently, I discussed this with a friend, and I said we tried and tried to save the performance horse, and now it's about saving the breed. He said, well, shouldn't that have been what it was about all along? That spoke volumes to me. At this point in time, and as I have progressed, I have realized that we must let go of the sore padded performance horse and step soundly into the future, or we will not realize any future at all. In May of 2012, I was, as president, faced with perhaps the most critical decision that has ever faced our breed. Should I continue to perpetuate the lie that padded and chained horses are mostly sound?
Would you pull the microphone a little closer? I just heard that they can't hear you in the control room.
Sorry. Should I continue to perpetuate the lie that padded and chained performance Tennessee walking horses are mostly sound and only a few bad apples soar them? Or should I recognize the truth that most all of them have been sored or are sore? This question came into mind after the ABC expose nightline that you saw earlier. I was president that day and happened to be in Wimding, Germany, judging a horse show and saw the world's reaction from the outside of this horrific practice. I knew that day that things must change. And the brutal beating and soaring and electric prodding of horses, like people with Jackie McConnell have done, need to stop. I've known Jackie McConnell since I was 5 years old, and my family was friends with him. This event became the Tylenol crisis of the Tennessee walking horse breed, and the negative stigma associated with our breed due to soaring has caused the value of yearling colts to drop from $20,000 or more to many just to $300 to $500 in a few years. Our breed records reflect that last year we bred a small fraction of the number of years we bred 8 years ago. Our lack of ability to self-regulate over the past 43 years has brought our breed to this crossroads. I have observed more corruption in soaring horses, corrupt inspections, corrupt judging, corrupt training methods, corrupt business practices intertwined with this industry than I have seen anywhere on this earth. And this has nearly destroyed our great breed. It is now time someone took action to save our breed and make our economy grow again. An economy based on criminal activity is not healthy for our industry and not healthy for our country. For this to happen, the mechanically created and artificial gate known as the Big Lick must cease to exist, along with pads, action devices, and soaring, so that this dark cloud can be removed from our breed. In addition, the HIO inspection system should be eliminated so that the self-regulation can go away and things can be done in the right manner. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate the time to be here today and testify before you.
Thank you. Dr. DeHaven, you are recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee. I'm here today both as a veterinarian and also as a representative of the American Veterinary Medical Association. Mr. Chairman, while I will be giving an abbreviated statement, I request that my full written testimony be included in the hearing record. The AVMA is the recognized voice of our nation's veterinarians, representing more than 84,000 members, or roughly 80% of all veterinarians in the United States. My testimony today, though, also represents the joint efforts between AVMA and the American Association of Equine Practitioners. Together, we are committed to upholding the health and welfare of our nation's horses. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, as I believe I have a very unique perspective, having been engaged in this issue since very early in my career. Prior to the AVMA, I was the administrator with the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service and had national responsibility for enforcement of the Horse Protection Act. But even before that, my first role with the USDA was as a field veterinary medical officer, where I gained 6 years of boots-on-the-ground experience enforcing the Horse Protection Act and working at horse shows. I know the walking horse industry and its problems from the ground up. I want to thank Congressman Whitfield for his leadership in introducing and championing H.R. 1518, the Prevent All Soring Act, or PAST Act. I believe it represents a unique opportunity to, once and for all, end the cruel and inhumane practice of soring our nation's walking horses. I've witnessed the long-lasting and damaging effects that soring has on horses and feel that this bill is necessary in order to stop this culture of abuse that has existed for more than 40 years in the walking horse industry. All of us know what soring is and that it's an unethical and inhumane practice, and it involves deliberately inflicting pain to exaggerate the leg motion of some gaited horses, but especially Tennessee walking horses, spotted saddle horses, and racking horses. Not only is it inhumane, but it's also unethical, giving an advantage to those trainers who use the practice to achieve this unnatural gait known as the big lick. Horses can be sored with chemicals, which are typically caustic liquids applied to the horse's lower leg, making that leg sensitive to the touch. Action devices, which are bracelet-like chains or rollers, are then placed on the legs and then strike that area of the pastern, exacerbating the pain that has already been sored. Although there's little reason to use these chains in the show ring unless a horse has been sored, the current law still permits their use. Horses can also be sored using physical methods, resulting in pain when the horse's hoof strikes the ground. A few examples of this include improperly trimming the hoof to expose sensitive tissues, placing foreign objects such as metal bolts between the shoe pads and the sole of the foot, or improper shoeing techniques. Performance packages, or the so-called stacks and pads, are often nailed to the horse's natural hoof and secured by a metal band that runs across the hoof wall. That adds weight to the horse's leg, causing the hoof to strike with more force and also at an abnormal angle. These pads can also be used to conceal foreign objects that apply painful pressure to the sole of the horse's foot. Soring is detected through visual and manual inspections and through the use of various types of technology. Even so, unethical trainers and owners have developed creative ways to avoid detection. These include, but are not limited to, the use of numbing agents on the horse's legs to mask the pain during the inspection, the use of harsh or even painful training methods called stewarding that teaches the horse if they flinch or otherwise show evidence of pain during inspection that they will be subject to even more severe abuse. Looking back, Congress recognized the importance of stopping this egregious practice when they passed the Horse Protection Act with the goal of ending this practice. Unfortunately, the law did not go far enough. Many factors, including unethical trainers and owners who continue to soar, show judges who use this or reward this bad behavior, and insufficient funding, as well as strong political influences, all of these have contributed to a culture of corruption within the walking horse industry, and that's what allows soring to continue today. Many trainers and owners feel, in fact, that they must soar if they are going to be competitive. One of the major drawbacks of the current enforcement program is reliance on the walking horse industry to police itself. This is a proverbial fox watching the hen house. Industry inspectors commonly have inherent conflicts of interest, and therefore it can be to their advantage to let a sore horse into the show ring. Indeed, a 2008 white paper by the American Association of Equine Practitioners, as well as the 2010 USDA OIG report, confirmed this assertion, and both of those reports called for the ending of this self-policing practice. The data submitted with my written testimony shows violation rates vary from year to year, but I want to draw your attention to several points. First, violation rates are never zero. Second, oversight by USDA veterinarians shows that inspectors are much more likely to find violations when, in fact, they have oversight. This legislation is endorsed by more than 100 organizations, including every veterinary medical association at the state level in the U.S. Thus, it means that every member of this subcommittee has constituents who are veterinarians that want this bill passed. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thank you to the committee for this opportunity to testify on behalf of the
Thank you. Dr. Bennett, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the committee, I thank you for the opportunity to be here and discuss H.R. 1518 and the impact it would have on the walking horse industry. I've been a licensed veterinarian for 33 years, and currently I'm licensed in the states of Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. I'm a member of the AVMA, the AEP, the Kentucky Veterinary Medical Association, the Tennessee Veterinary Medical Association, the Florida Association of Equine Practitioners, Tennessee Walking Horse Breeders and Exhibitors Association, and also a member of TCVM, which is traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, which correlates to I do acupuncture. I have also been the veterinarian for the Humane Society of the United States to look after the horses that were confiscated from the Jackie McConnell stables in West Tennessee. I've also been the veterinarian for the Humane Society of the United States, horses confiscated in East Tennessee from the Larry Whelan stables. I've also worked for the USDA in their annual training programs to train the inspectors, the DQPs that inspect the horses. I've taught classes at those courses. I go through all that merely to say that I am the one person on this panel that every day is out there where the rubber meets the road. My practice is located in Shelbyville, Tennessee. Up to 60% of it is made up of Tennessee walking horses. The rest are Western performance horses, American saddlebreds, hunter jumpers, occasional mule, and a miniature, I guess, to keep me humble. One thing that I would bring out after we saw the video, nobody in this room should put up with animal cruelty of whatever breed at all. But make no mistake, the Horse Protection Act as it is written today and as it's being proposed today would have no jurisdiction over either one of those cases. The industry, as Mr. Whitfield says, has data that says we're 98% compliant. The USDA data says we're 96.6% compliant. The reason I'm here today is I feel like that the industry is moving forward. On the other hand, I get asked, if you're opposed to H.R. 1518, then you're for soaring horses. That is absolutely not the case. There's not a person on this panel or in this room that doesn't view soaring as a cancer on this industry. As a medical professional, I'd prefer to cut it out with a scaffold blade. H.R. 1518 wants to use a chainsaw. I was lucky enough in the fall of 2012 to meet in Southern Kentucky with Congressman Whitfield, discuss the same issues that we had today. And I too wonder, after 40-some years in the past year since we met, why are we still having these problems? And I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, I think the technology has caught up with the horse training. Now I think it's time for the Horse Protection Act to catch up to the technology. I would invite each and every one of you anytime, don't have to call ahead, come down and ride with me, see what I see. Got an open invitation. And with that said, I do want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'll do my very best to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. Ms. Benefield, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
I would like to thank Chairman Terry and Ranking Member Schakowsky and distinguished members of the subcommittee for giving me the opportunity to testify here today. Mr. Chairman, I would like to request that my written testimony and exhibits be admitted into the official record. Thank you.
All members, your statements will be entered into the record.
My name is Donna Benefield, and I'm the Vice President of the International Walking Horse Association. I've been involved in the administration of 4 USDA certified inspection programs over the past 25 years. I have inspected thousands of horses for compliance with the Horse Protection Act and its regulations. I have been in hundreds of meetings here in Washington, D.C. with the USDA and the Tennessee walking horse industry to achieve reform in the industry and compliance with the federal law. When Congress passed the act in 1970, their intent was to eradicate soring, not regulate it, as is being done today under the current horse protection regulations. On April 27, 1979, the Federal Register published the following, quote, "If the horse industry makes no effort to establish a workable self-regulatory program for the elimination of sore horses, or if such a program is established but does not succeed in eliminating the sore horse problem within a reasonable length of time, the department will give serious consideration to the prohibition of all action devices and pads," end quote. This industry has had over 40 years to rid itself of this abuse, and for numerous reasons has not only resisted but has refused reform at every turn. They have maintained control and regulated soring through fear and intimidation for decades. Back in the 1980s, there were headlines on the front page of the Nashville, Tennessean newspaper regarding death threats on me. The FBI became involved in arranged protection for my husband and me for many years. In the 1990s, we had a horse killed. Years later, another horse was poisoned at a horse show. Due to the time constraints, I'm going to share with you only a few of the things that are done to these horses to enhance their gait and to avoid detection of and a violation of the Horse Protection Act. What they do to sore a horse. Caustic chemicals are applied to the pasterns, ankles, the cannon bone, or the shin of the horse. Then wrap the legs in plastic for 24 to 48 hours. They are tied to the wall. They put duct tape around the wraps to prevent the horse from chewing the wraps off their legs due to the intense pain. They will use an electric grinder to sand the soles of the feet down to the quick until beads of blood come to the surface before applying the shoe. They will insert foreign objects between the soles of the horse's feet and stacks. They will pressure shoe a horse by standing a horse on steel bolts or wooden blocks. They will sand a strip of the hoof wall down to the quick, apply a band across the top of the area and tighten it down with a screwdriver to create pressure on the sensitive hoof wall or to create additional pressure to the sole of the pressure-shod horse. I have seen the bands sheared off the hoof near the top of the hoof many times, leaving the horse standing on a bloody nub in a pool of blood in the show ring. At a recent seminar, one of the industry vets instructed attendees what supplies to have in their grooming kit so that they were prepared when this happens. The reason why these things are not detected during inspection: they steward the horses. Stewarding is when a person will do a mock inspection of the horse's pasterns while another person will hold the horse. When the horse reacts to the pain, the person will hit the horse in the head with a 2x4, an axe handle, or a baseball bat, among other things, until he stops reacting to the pain. I've seen this many times. He then has been taught not to react during the inspection at the horse show, as seen on the ABC Nightline show with Jackie McConnell that you just saw. They use numbing agents applied topically or injected by the trainer or a sympathetic industry vet to block the pain at shows. They will apply alligator clips to the scrotum, anus, vulva, tongue, tail, or the teats of the horse to create a painful distraction during the inspection. They put zip ties or piano wire on the gums of the horse and pull it very tight, creating pain to take their mind off of the pain on their feet. They use glue on hair, tattoo ink, sprays, graphite, among other things to hide the illegal scars. They put bit burrs under the saddle girth and cinch the girth up tight to create pain to distract the horse. Salicylic acid is used to remove scars. They slather a paste of salicylic acid and alcohol, cut heel, or DMSO, or whatever onto the pastern, wrap them in plastic for 24 to 48 hours to cook. The horse will typically lie in his stall, breaking out in a sweat, moaning with pain, and resist getting to his feet. They then have to go into the stall and beat the horse to his feet, as was seen in the ABC Nightline Jackie McConnell show. After 48 hours, they will take the wraps off and the skin begins to slough off. They then begin the tedious process of literally combing the skin off of the leg, thereby hopefully putting the horse back into compliance with the current horse protection SCAR rule regulation. Excuse me. The AVMA and AEP recently issued a statement on the impact of the pads and chains. Quote, "What the science says is that raising the heels, placing a horse on pads and wedges 8 degrees can cause the horse to stumble and tire easily. Additionally, horses placed on pads and wedges showed inflammation of the flexor tendon area of the pastern. Chains that weigh 6 ounces will start to cause hair loss without the use of chemical irritants. Chains heavier than 6 ounces used on horses that have been previously sored will cause open lesions within 2 weeks. We're happy to say we did our homework, and yes, the science that's available appears to support our position. However, the industry has once again missed the point of the AVMA and AEP's decision. The AVMA and AEP's primary concern is that the chains and pads are used to exacerbate and hiding soring. For this reason, IWHA endorses this bill, and we're here today asking for the passage of H.R. 1518 amendment to correct this chronic 43-year-old problem.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bippen, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I ask that my testimony and exhibits be included in the official record.
And they will be.
Thank you. Friends of Sound Horses, or FOSH, is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to ending the abuse of soring. FOSH is an umbrella organization of 15 gaited horse breeds, including the Tennessee Walking Horse, Spotted Saddle Horse, and Wrecking Horse. FOSH has been in existence since 1998 and supports the PAST Act. For its entire existence, FOSH has been committed to ending soring. During this time, FOSH has worked with the USDA, developed and populated the largest database in existence of HPA violations, built a public website with a library of publications on soring since 1956, sponsored 3 Sound Horse conferences, and researched numerous technology solutions to detect soring. Although we often heard from the walking horse industry spokesman that the problem of soring is the result of a few bad apples, the total number of HPA violation records is over 10,000 since the mid-'80s. This history of ongoing violation spans more than 40 years through trainers, entire families, old and new names, and this is why FOSH has reached the conclusion, as have the other endorsers of this bill, that legislative change is the only solution to end the plague of soring. FOSH is one of over 24 national and international walking horse organizations that support the PAST Act. These organizations have been in existence for many years and do not allow padded and chained horses in their show rings. After trying to bring about change in the traditional show world for years, concerned exhibitors and spectators abandoned venues like the Celebration. Banning the padded and chained horse has allowed these organizations to thrive because exhibitors and spectators at their shows do not want to be surrounded by the abuse that occurs in the big lick show world, nor do they want to exhibit with people who use illegal means to win a ribbon. Through its research and experience, FOSH has determined that a combination of weak inspections, conflicted DQPs, and the failure of HIOs to report violations has created a culture of acceptance in exhibiting sored horses, which routinely hides and misrepresents the data to deceive Congress and the public about the widespread nature of the problem. A few specific examples of the lack of compliance with the Act among the big lick segment of the industry include: the USDA reported that at the 2012 Celebration, in a random swabbing for signs of foreign prohibited substances, 145 swab samples of 190 tested positive for foreign substances. This is a 76% non-compliance rate. Celebration Management, however, announced to the public in news releases that it would be swabbing every horse on the ground for prohibited foreign substances. They reported only 2 positive swab samples in almost 2,000 entries, while the USDA found 145 in a sample of only 190 horses. Based on examples such as this one, FOSH has concluded that the current HIO system is broken, or else there would not be such a large discrepancy between the USDA samples and those of the Celebration. During 2010, 2011, and half of 2012, the violation rate for 3 compliant HIOs, FOSH, International Walking Horse, and National Walking Horse Association, was only 2/100ths of 1%, or 8 violations out of over 42,000 inspections. These 3 compliant HIOs have perfect inspection records when their shows are attended and audited by the USDA. By contrast, the violation rate at the 2012 celebration was 9%, which is 450 times greater than that of the compliant HIOs. In August this year, the USDA released figures for the show season through April 2013 that further supports passage of PAST. Of 241 HPA violations, 93% of the violations were on padded horses. Not only that, when the USDA inspectors were present at shows this year, the HPA violation rate was 280% greater than the rate at the shows when the USDA was not there. It is a conclusion also of FOSH that weak penalties imposed by non-compliant HIOs are meaningless and do not serve as deterrents. As an example, the top 5 2013 Riders' Cup contenders shared 94 reported HPA violations as reported at the publicly available website hpadata.us. Another factor influencing FOSH's support of stronger penalties is the repeat violator list generated by that same website. This repeat violator list is 260 pages long, single-spaced. Much stronger penalties are needed to serve as a deterrent, as the current penalty structure has been meaningless and ignored by violators for many years. While FOSH has been a part of efforts to save the Tennessee walking, racking, and spotted saddle industries by providing a network of horse shows where competitors train horses humanely and play fairly and in compliance with the law, we have noticed that the stigma associated with the problems in the big lick industry has caused economic harm to our breeds. Because most true horsemen do not want to be associated in any way with animal abuse or illegal activity, fewer horses are being bred, raised, trained, shod, boarded, fed, treated with veterinary care, and shown in our breeds. The negative impact on the economy caused by the ongoing presence of soring and the failure of the Horse Protection Act to eradicate the problem is far-reaching. The PAST Act is needed to fix the deficiency in the current law, restore honor to the breeds afflicted by soring, and bring more people and dollars back into the horse industry. In closing, FOSH reiterates that its experience, analysis, and research have led it to strongly support PAST, which provides for greater penalties, abolishment of the HIO system, and elimination of devices that are an integral part of the abuse of soring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vippen. Now, Mr. Hickey, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes, and your statement will be part of the record.
I pushed it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this testimony on behalf of the American Horse Council in support of the Prevent All Soring Tactics Act of 2013. My name is Jay Hickey. I'm the president of the American Horse Council. We are a Washington-based organization that represents the horse industry here in D.C. before Congress and the federal regulatory agencies. Our organization's members include organizations that represent show, racing, recreation, and stakeholders. You've already heard about soring and its mechanics, the pain it causes horses, the Horse Protection Act, the continued problems with soring in segments of certain breeds, and the bill at issue. I would like to explain the position of the American Horse Council and how we came to support this legislation. It seems strange that an industry would come to the federal government and support additional federal regulation, but there are good reasons for that. When the original bill was introduced at the end of last Congress, the AHC felt it was worthy of review. We asked 2 of our committees, our Animal Welfare Committee and our Horse Show Committee, to review it. After meetings, numerous calls, emails, lengthy discussions, and serious considerations, it was clear there was strong support for this bill. I think simply stated, everybody felt it was an idea whose time had finally come. The 2 AHC committees recommended that the board support it, and we now do. Why do we support this legislation? We support it because we have heard testimony about because soring continues. We've heard testimony about the USDA OIG study. We've heard testimony that a meaningful percent of horses in the performance or big lick sector of the walking horse industry are still being sored, despite efforts to stop it. Many actions have been initiated over the last 40 years to end this practice. New organizations formed, new promises made, but the problem persists. We support this legislation because soring is garnering more and more adverse and unnecessary publicity for the horse show industry at large. Witness the press about Jackie McConnell and Larry Whelan and others. This affects the non-walking horse sector of the show industry. The public sees other breeds doing an animated gait and thinks it is a walking horse and being sored rather than performing its natural gait. That reflects badly on the entire show horse industry. We support this legislation because federal law to prohibit soring has been on the books for 43 years, but it continues in a segment of the walking horse industry. Everyone maintains that they oppose soring, but there are differences of opinion on how to stop it. Almost from the date the Act was passed 43 years ago, these differences have been discussed, debated, argued, litigated, lobbied, and been the subject of federal rulemakings. The discussion has become toxic within the horse industry. The AHC and major show organizations now believe it is time for the controversy to stop, and that only a change to the existing federal law can stop it. Finally, and most importantly, we support this legislation because it is the right thing to do for the horses. The AHC believes that we need a federal change to the Horse Protection Act, a change to eliminate action devices and stacks in the big lick and performance horse segments of the walking horse industry, a change to inaugurate a new inspection program that will rely on independent professionals, including accredited veterinarians, to inspect the horses involved rather than continuing the current failed DQP program, and a change to provide for uniform and strong penalties, including disqualification for life, if it comes to that. The Prevent All Soring Tactics Act is the answer. The past act is a narrowly drafted bill that is focused on soring and limited to the problem it is trying to solve. It will change the federal law to end the bickering and debate, reform the regulatory system, and finally eliminate soring. The past act does not adversely affect or unnecessarily burden other segments of the show horse industry that are not soaring horses and have no history of soaring horses. The following major horse show organizations support the past act: American Association of Equine Practitioners, American Morgan Horse Association, American Paint Horse Association, American Quarter Horse Association, Appaloosa Horse Club, Arabian Horse Association, Pinto Horse Association of America, American Saddlebred Horse Association, U.S. Equestrian Federation, United Professional Horsemen's Association. There are others, but those are national organizations. That is a large part of the show horse industry. For those of you familiar with the horse industry, it is an industry famous for a lack of uniformity on anything, lack of unanimity on anything. But in this case, there is amazing consensus in support of the past act. We ask you to pass this legislation. After 43 years of federal regulation and soring continuing, it is the right thing to do. We must stop soring, the culture of soring, and pass this legislation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And all time for the witnesses has concluded, and so at this time it's our opportunity to follow up and ask questions to the panel. And as chairman, I get to go first. So it seems to me that listening and reading testimony, it boils down into two distinct camps. Maybe that's a camp is too strong of a word. Everyone seems to agree that the tactics process that we witnessed in the video clip and that we've read about is horrible and should not be part of the walking horse industry. Where there seems to be a split between the testimony here is the need for any additional layer of legislation or H.R. 15 in specifically. So I think for me that's where I want to kind of dive down into is why there's opposition to this bill. Now, Commissioner Johnson, you mentioned in your testimony that there is a problem, although it's small, in your testimony, and that there are reasonable solutions. What could you be more specific in what you think would be the better solution? Turn on your microphone.
Really, this is an area that I'm not an expert in, that I look to those who are the experts, and Dr. Bennett has long been recognized as one of those experts that I consult with, and I would look to him to answer those kind of questions, but I don't feel like I have the expertise. Okay.
I appreciate that. So, Dr. Bennett, you established your credibility and expertise in an impressive way. So you also mentioned that this bill is not necessary and perhaps goes too far. Would you clarify, A, is there something that should be done? What part of this bill is any part of H.R. 1518, do you think, appropriate and would be effective in stopping these procedures?
Thank you for the opportunity and great questions. I would think the greatest part about H.R. 1518 is got us in this room so we can discuss this problem. Now, with that said, Mrs. Benefield, who I consider a friend, brought up the fact, just one thing. I'm not going to go through the list, but spurs under their saddles. They go through inspections now, the saddles have to be off. That's mandated. The other thing that I would see is, like I said, we have science and technology. I've got 3 digital X-ray machines that can shoot X-rays and have the results in 6 seconds. I've got 3 thermography cameras that measures the physiology of the horse. X-rays measures the anatomy. That's science. There's swabbing that you'll hear about. There's machines out there.
Do you X-ray, is this process done before every show, or is this just when an accusation has been brought up that you'll go to the extent of using this new technology?
The walking horse industry themselves does not have X-ray machines at their inspections. The USDA, when they come in, bring their X-ray machines and veterinarians, and they have the option to X-ray at their discretion. And that kind of came up, if I may, this kind of came up on the X-rays over a 1979 study from Michigan State University on laminitis.
We play them this Saturday, so I hope you say that you want them to lose. Go forward, though.
Yes. Yeah, Kentucky lost basketball. I'm not doing good. But anyway, this is a 1979 study that had to do with horses that had laminitis and if they could come back and be in the show ring. Anybody that does equine podiatry or works on horses' feet, the science is well past that now. So and that's one rule that we're boxed into with the radiographs. The good thing is the bolts that are under there or any of those things, the X-rays pick those up. You can see them right there on the spot. And that's what I would like to get across, is let's get the science and catch those horses with science objectively before they go in the show ring.
How about the issue that was brought up with conflict of interests with the inspectors? Is there a way to resolve that?
Yes. Yes, it can be resolved. The thing is, they hammer me with 40-some years of history, and I can't argue that. That's the reason I'm here. I don't like soaring. The problem we've got is with the show, HIO, that Mr. Whitfield was alluding to, that it was started in 2009 as a result of the AAP white paper, made the inspector sign a non-conflict of interest. There's steps in place, but that's one HIO. There's 13 HIOs. Right. Who certifies those HIOs? The USDA. I get hammered all the time at these meetings I go to. We need one HIO. I agree. 100%. But there's 13.
Thank you. Now the ranking member, Ms. Schakowsky, has 5 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, we're, I think, seeing 2 different worlds. One that says no problem, this may have been a problem, isn't a problem anymore, and another that says that this is ongoing. Ms. Benefield, I wanted to ask you, how do you account for the testimony that we've heard that the walking horse industry is approaching 98% compliance rate, 96% compliance rate with regard to soaring that they claim? The discrepancy in what you see happening.
Well, what goes on with a lot of these horses is trainers or veterinarians will go in and actually numb the horses on the showgrounds prior to inspection with topical applications of creams or sprays, or they will actually inject them with numbing agents to get them through inspection, in addition to the stewarding that I discussed. So the horse is now trained to pass the inspection and not elicit a pain response. That will interrupt your percentage rates significantly. And also the rates that they're counting on are based on entries. For example, if you have 10 horses at a horse show and that horse goes in one class and he's inspected and has turned down, that would be a 10% non-compliant rate. But if that horse goes in 10 classes each, that's 100 horses, and those are the 100 entries. So now you're looking at a 1%. So they dilute the percentages by calling them entries when horses go in multiple classes, rather than calling them just individual horse individuals.
How do you know this is happening still? Dr. Bennett says the technologies have caught up, and that isn't happening anymore. How do you know it's happening?
Well, I've witnessed it. In fact, at the celebration, when I worked for the celebration in 2010, I observed a veterinarian prior to a class actually injecting a horse with numbing agents prior to inspection.
All right, Dr. Bennett, just real quickly, because I have another question for...
It makes no sense to numb a horse. One reason is that we want the exaggerated gait. If you numb his legs, Dr. DeHaven's a licensed veterinarian. He can tell you they're not going to pick their feet up. The second thing is, if we have the swabbing and the technology, we can check for those numbing agents right there on the spot. Thank you.
Mr. Irby, you've been associated with this industry for such a long time, and yet you're here today supporting the legislation. What have you observed?
Over the past year, I actually kind of did my own informal study, because I did at one time stand up for the padded performance horse. So I went around from barn to barn and saw that the majority of all of the trainers were either still soring horses, would even tell you what they were doing, applying hand cleaners, WD-40, and kerosene and mustard oil and things like that to their feet, and went all over Middle Tennessee, parts of Kentucky, Alabama, and other states. And my conclusion was that the majority of everybody, if not everybody, is still soring horses today in the padded performance division, and that I could not find one single padded performance horse that had not been sored at some point in their life.
Could you speak to the economic motivation for trainers to soar and for the horse industry organizations to turn a blind eye to the practice?
The main economic factor is that by soring a horse, a trainer could take a colt that they may go buy that's 16 or 18 months old and take him to a training barn, and within 90 days, a colt that they purchased $500 to $5,000 for, they could sell for as high as $100,000. So it's a way for them to make a quick buck, but is a detriment to the industry, and it's only about their personal gain.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Ms. Bippen a question. You had talked about at the end of your testimony that there was an economic benefit to the breeds that you represent to end this practice and support. How do you explain that it would actually be beneficial? Because we're hearing testimony how important it is not to have further inspections.
Yes, the stigma that has attached to Tennessee walking horses has caused quite a few people to not want to own those horses. And even myself, when I explain I have Tennessee walking horses, I have to explain that they are not show horses. And they ask, are they the ones where they take those pads and those chains and they put them in the show ring? So I believe that the Tennessee walking horse has a fabulous disposition, and many more people should own one. But they just do not want to be associated with that soaring, and they don't want to have to worry about participating in shows where soaring takes place. So without that stigma, I believe the industry could grow substantially.
And my time is about up. Thank you very much, all of you, for your testimony.
Thank you very much. The chair recognizes the vice chair of the full committee, Congresswoman Blackburn of Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hickey, thanks for being here. You're testifying on behalf of the American Horse Council, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, you're testifying for ending the practice of soaring, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the major contributing...
May I interrupt? Will you pull the microphone closer?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. The major contributing industry to the Horse Council is the thoroughbred industry, right?
No.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
Okay, I have information that it is.
No.
And, of course, the thoroughbred industry has had over 3,000 horses die in the last 4 years, died on the track. So you're saying there's a presumed problem with the Tennessee walking horse, and I'd like to ask you why you think that is worse than the issue that exists with what the stats would say is the problem with the thoroughbred industry.
Well, I'm testifying today on the PAST Act. I believe that next week you'll have a hearing on the other bill that Ms. Schakowsky and Mr. Whitfield have involving medication and racing.
Okay.
That would be, I think, a more appropriate question there. But let me just say. Let me
move on with my question.
Okay,
Let me reclaim my time. Okay, with the number of deaths in the thoroughbred industry, I'm curious as to how you can be a proponent for self-regulation in the thoroughbred industry, but you are not a proponent for self-regulation in the walking horse industry.
Well, I'm not sure that self-regulation is correct. I'm a proponent for amending the Horse Protection Act, which has been a federal law in existence for 43 years, to amend it very narrowly, I might point out, to prohibit and finally stop soaring, which was passed 43 years ago to try to do. It has not worked. So that was my testimony there.
Okay.
Let
me reclaim my time and move on with questions then. So if you're for that, now, let me ask you this. Would the American Horse Council support the use of action devices and pads in the other competitive areas where these may be used with other show breeds? And what makes the action device and pad used in the walking horse industry different? And then should all breeds be banned from the use of action devices and pads?
All breeds, no, and other people help me with this because this gets into some specific breed questions. Each breed regulates its own showing and classes. All other breeds prohibit the use of action devices and the large pads and stacks that we're talking about today in the show ring.
Okay, let me
go only
to
the performance horse.
Dr. Bennett, and then have him pick this up.
Can I one?
Sure.
Soaring would not be, and again, anybody else, soaring would not be appropriate or helpful in the activities and the classes and the shows of other breeds. In fact, it would be counterproductive. So this act does not, although it applies to them, it does not apply to them in the same fashion. They are not regulated because they don't soar their horses.
Reclaiming, and Dr. Bennett, you're recognized. Do the pad and action devices cause any harm to the horse?
I have done an exhaustive research myself as best I could, and I can not find, going back to the early 70s, any published scientific literature that says the package or pads on the Tennessee walking horses or the action device cause lameness and or soaring.
Okay. And
is there an article out there? Possibly could be. I cannot find it.
Okay. In your 33 years of working as a veterinarian and working in the field of walking horses, has the condition of the horses competing in the ring improved with regards to compliance with the Horse Protection Act?
Yes, I can say that they have improved according to the Horse Protection Act. And I would like to comment about the slide that they show of the Tennessee walking horses going around the celebration ring. And it makes you think that those horses are sore. Those horses that got in the ring have been through the most stringent inspection process of any horse. The horse that they want to show should be the one that got turned down. Just a sideline.
Thank you. You're back.
At this point, we recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank all the witnesses for their testimony. I also want to thank my colleague, Mr. Whitfield, and also Congresswoman Schakowsky for their sponsorship of this bill, which I'm proud to co-sponsor. I'd like to allow Mr. Hickey, it seems like you wanted to make a distinction between this situation and thoroughbred racing that you weren't able to make. Would you like to elaborate on your answer?
I mean, we can go into the late afternoon if we're going to get into other legislation too. But there's the situation briefly, and I should not be testifying on this, but briefly with the medication legislation and horse racing, it comes down to whether you should allow race day medication or not. There is a huge controversy within the racing industry as to whether race day medication is beneficial or is not beneficial, and that rages on. In the last 2 years, the uniform rules and on race day medication has gone into effect in, I think, 11 different states, and will go into effect, and there will be uniform rules on January 1. Now, this is something for a future hearing, but I just wanted to point that out. There is no debate within the horse show industry as to whether soaring, which is what we're talking about, is appropriate or not.
I also want to carry on the conversation that the chairman started about the nature of the objections to the bill, because there are several misconceptions, it seems like, about what the bill, at least differences of opinion about what the bill does or doesn't do. And you made the statement, and others have made it, that this really wouldn't solve the problem because it doesn't specifically relate to soaring. But in Section 2D1B, it's clearly bans soaring, I think, when it states that conduct, quote, causing a horse to become sore or directing another person to cause a horse to become sore, unquote, end quote, is prohibited. Do you don't think that
I think what I was
is a sufficient definition? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. What I was alluding to is, there again, why are we still having this after 40 years? The problem that I see is that the inspection process is so subjective. And what happens is a horse that gets turned down, say, for SCAR rule violation, if he gets a penalty from one HIO, that penalty is not recognized by another HIO, so he can go somewhere else and show. The penalties and the subjectivity of the nature of the inspection is the problem I have. Let's get down to science, and we could get this solved. If we use industry numbers, we're at 98%. If we use USDA numbers, we're at 96%. We're making progress. And if I've talked to the AAP, I'm an AAP member, and they always say when the industry decides that they can show that they want to help themselves, then we'll be glad to jump in. We're getting there. We're not to the stage yet that I want to go and say, hey, help us, here's what we got. But we do have proof since 2009 when we got the most stringent HIO in place. But what happened when we penalized those people, they went somewhere else. It's like losing a driver's license in this county, but you can go to the next county and drive. It's an inconvenience, but you can still drive. If you took their driver's license away for the entire North America, then you penalized them. Does that answer?
Doesn't the original act deal with transporting horses that have been sored, though?
Yes, and this is a very emotional issue when you start looking at the tape of Jackie McConnell and all that. But there again, the Horse Protection Act doesn't cover that. It covers transport, showing, exhibiting, and offering for public sale.
There obviously also is a dispute over the number of the incidents, the frequency, I guess, of soaring, and numbers 97, 98%. Obviously, Mr. Irby and Ms. Pippin have very different numbers. Do you want to elaborate on? I know you've got lots of documentation that you.
Yes, I'm happy to elaborate on that. We have been analyzing the data for quite a few years, and we always analyze it according to the number of horses at a show, as Ms. Benefield spoke about. So if you have 10 horses at a show and 3 of them are sored, we consider that a 30% non-compliance rate. However, recently the numbers that are coming to us are entries. So if those 10 horses were in 10 classes, that's 100 entries, and they would say now that it's only a 3% non-compliance rate. And so those are the numbers that are coming back to us now from the non-compliant HIOs. We're unable to find out the actual the number of horses entered. Now what they're giving us are the entry rates. And because the flat-shod horses are not sored generally, and they are now becoming more popular, what they're going to do is boost up the sound horse rate for those groups.
I see. Mr. Irby, you want to elaborate on that, because you obviously have, at least anecdotally, have a very different opinion.
Yes, sir. I actually would like to comment. I can't cite the numbers, but if you see the stacks on the table here and the chains, this segment of our industry is where the problem is. And I think what Ms. Pippin is saying is we don't have this problem. You don't see it hardly at all within the normal, regularly shod Tennessee walking horse, which that entire division, all those divisions will still be left for the majority with this bill. And this bill eliminates this division where the majority of the problem is, which is less than 10% of our entire breed. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yarmouth. And at this time, recognize the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Lance, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you all. And let me say that I recognize the expertise of everybody on the panel. This is not an area that I know well, but certainly I will continue to review the testimony. I represent a district in New Jersey that includes the New Jersey area related to the horse industry. There are constituents of mine who this time of year ride to the hounds in places like Bernardsville and Far Hills and Bedminster, and perhaps some on the panel are familiar with that area. Although I am from New Jersey and not from the South, I certainly respect and honor the great state of Tennessee. I was honored to go to law school in Nashville, and I have been in Shelbyville as a guest of Mrs. Prentice Cooper, the widow of one of your great governors, whose son, Jim, is a colleague of ours here in Congress. Jim's brother, William, and my wife and I were in law school together. And I have witnessed the performance in Shelbyville, I believe, at the end of the summer regarding the Tennessee walking horse. To Commissioner Johnson, is it possible to continue showing the Tennessee walking horse without soaring?
Well, I believe the industry has already proven that, yes, it is. But certainly there are individuals, bad apples, bad actors in every kind of activity.
Yes, of course. Of course, there are bad apples. Perhaps Congress is aware of that in its own responsibilities. To Ms. Benefield, is it possible to continue to show the Tennessee walking horse, eliminating the abuses you suggest that exist?
Yes, I do believe that you can continue showing the walking horse without the abuse. You will notice that, according to the records that Ms. Bippen has been expressing to you, there are a lot of shows around the United States that do not use the pad and chain. And, for example, in California, a show at the Los Angeles Equestrian Center may have as many as 150 individual horses at a show, and they're all flat-shod. And yet at another venue in Los Angeles, they'll have a padded show, and a big class for them would be 2 horses or 1 horse. So the flat-shod horse is continuing to show around the United States, and this problem seems to be more centralized in the South now. It used to be widespread around the United States, but it has become more centralized.
Thank you. Let me say, not as a question, but as a comment, I hope and expect that this is an area where people of goodwill can come together, and the purpose of this hearing is to elicit information from the distinguished members of the panel who are expert in this area. And I am hopeful, based upon the expertise of everyone on the panel, that a solution can occur. And let me repeat, I recognize the expertise of all on the panel, and I do not believe that it is appropriate for one part of the nation to point a finger at another part of the nation, and I certainly want to work with everybody on the panel, including those from the great state of Tennessee, a state that is very fond to me, and I look forward to continuing this discussion to protect what we need to protect regarding horses, and certainly that is true in New Jersey, and particularly the district I serve. I yield back the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. At this time, recognize gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have given the committee a series of statements from individuals who are deeply concerned about this issue but weren't able to testify before the committee today. I ask unanimous consent that these statements be submitted for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Technology has caught up with the training. I think, Mr. Irby, you talked about, or was that Dr. Bennett? Okay, can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. There again, why are we still having this discussion after 43 years? Why can't we put it to rest? And in my opinion, the subjectivity of the inspection system, along with 13 HIOs, where there's no penalties that are transferred between them, it makes it a glass ceiling that we can't get above, in my mind. The technology is there now. Before that horse goes in the show ring, he could be tested and make sure that there's no caustic chemicals that we heard about, no numbing agents that we heard about on there. We can x-ray him and make sure there's nothing in under that pad. We can have farriers there that can pull the shoes off and put them back on. The technology is there to stop this without taking the industry away. And I would argue with the 10%. I think it's, if you read the HR 1518, it's weighted shoes, pads, chains. They do make mention that you can still have a therapeutic pad or for protection, but that's kind of vague to me.
Well, I've heard soaring described in several different ways here today, but is it possible through this new technology that you're talking about to tell if they'd been soared in the past and healed? Can they heal from this, or can you always see that there's signs where they had been soared in the past?
Yeah, I think you're alluding to, sir, the change in tissue that we saw on the screen earlier. And remember that skin is an organ, just like your heart, just like your liver, just like...
Yeah, but the skin doesn't show up on an X-ray, does it?
No, sir, but what I'm getting to...
When you were talking about the X-rays earlier, I understand the deal about the bolts or whatever, but other than that, does the X-ray, what are you looking for there as far as the soaring?
You could look for pressure shoeing, like Mrs. Benefield said, where they can take and rasp the sole down. We have parameters that we know that certain millimeters of sole depth is protective to the horse's foot. We could measure that with digital X-rays.
You also, during your testimony, you offered to let us come ride with you, which...
Yes, sir.
Don't offer, I'll probably show up, because I always say, don't invite me anywhere, because I'll always be there. But what would we see if we rode with you? I didn't get your point on what are we going to see in relation to this topic that would...
Yeah, basically what I was getting to there is come and see the horses with their clothes off and with their clothes on. Go to the barns and see how they're prepped and see how they're ridden and see them getting ready to go to the shows and go and see how they're inspected and the process that they go through to get into the show ring.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Irby, you said that, I don't remember the fellow's name now, that was on the Nightline tape. How old is that Nightline tape?
I believe it's from May of 2012.
Okay, and what's the fellow's name that was?
Jackie McConnell.
Okay, and Mr. McConnell, you say that you're friends with him and have been ever since you were a little kid?
I haven't spoken to him in a long, long time, but I've known him because my parents have been
probably
friends
not
with him
since May
since
of 2012. Your parents what?
They've been friends with him since I was 5 years old.
Okay, and someone like that, do they not have a reputation for, I mean, was that not known before this Nightline tape came out? I mean, I would think that people in any field, if they're doing something that's untoward, illegal, I used to fish a lot of bass tournaments. If there were people that were suspected of cheating and later proven to be cheating, most people knew that they were cheating. Was this not known before this from this individual?
I believe it probably was known. He was actually on a federal suspension at the time and still participating at horse shows. And he's not the exception to the rule. He's the rule. Within the padded performance division, this is typically the way things are, and you pretty much have to cheat or you can't compete.
How can it be the rule if 98% are complying?
That's mainly because of the masking agents I believe Ms. Benefield spoke about and things they can do to hide. I probably have to allude to Dr. DeHaven or Ms. Benefield on that.
Well, let me ask Ms. Benefield on the numbing agents you were talking about earlier. I kind of agree with Dr. Bennett. I mean, if you're trying to soar to make them pick up and do this, what do you call the gait again? The
big lick.
The big lick. If they're doing this big lick, how does numbing agents? I mean, why would that make them pick up their feet if their feet are numb?
The numbing agents don't, in fact, make them pick up their feet. What the trainers do is back at the barn, they will numb the horse's legs and they will establish a window.
When you say back at the barn, are you talking about on the day of the event, or are you talking about back at the barn at home?
Back at the barn in training. They will establish a window of when they put the numbing agent on and how long it takes for that numbing agent to wear off. So that way they have a timing on when to put it on and how long they have before it wears off. So they time it in front of the time they're going to go into the class.
A barn at the show or a barn at home?
No, at the barn at home. They're establishing their window.
They numb it there.
Then they use that same window.
I'm sorry?
Then they use that same window for their application at the horse show, so they know exactly the timing and when to put that agent on and when it'll wear off, so it'll work, so that it's no longer numbing the leg when they're in the showroom.
Science, if they can do that, I yield back.
Well, they do.
Thank
They
you.
do.
Mr. Kinzinger, do you have any questions? Then the last person is Mr. Whitfield, and he's last because he is actually not a member of this subcommittee, although he's the chair of Energy and Power Subcommittee. And so he is a guest of this subcommittee, and under our rules, the guests go last.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Terry, and thank all the witnesses today as well. Dr. DeHaven, I want to ask you a couple of questions. Dr. Bennett has referred to repeatedly about the subjectivity of inspections to determine soaring. Do you agree with him on that issue? Is it subjective or is it objective?
There is some level of subjectivity because most of the inspection is based on a digital palpation where you are palpating those areas of the foot that most likely are to be sore. However, having said that, and with a lot of experience in the field, there's always been good correlation between what the inspector is finding on digital palpation and what the technology, thermography and radiology, will tell you as well. So while Dr. Bennett referred to a lot of this as new technology, in fact, we've been using thermography and radiology, x-rays, for a number of years. But from a practical standpoint, when you have hundreds of horses that are going through inspection, you can't use that on every animal. So the mainstay of the inspection is digital palpation by that inspector, and indeed, good correlation between what the inspector is finding and what the technology would corroborate.
Well, do you believe that the current HIO DQP system is working?
We've heard a lot about the level of compliance. I've heard numbers like 96.6% and a 98.5% compliance rate. 2 points on that. One would argue after 43 years of a goal of zero soaring, we really haven't achieved what we meant to years ago. The other is that those compliance rates are based on a self-policing program where you have industry inspectors inspecting the industry. What the statistics also show is that those inspectors that work for the industry are about 10 times more likely to find a violation when they have a USDA veterinarian looking over their shoulder. So those compliance rates assume self-policing. When there is oversight, in fact, the compliance rate goes way down.
Well, it's my understanding that APHIS sends in inspectors only about 6% of the shows, and the violation rates are much higher there than they are with the self-policing of the DQPs. Is that correct?
Indeed. If we look at the statistics from 2012, with 71,000 inspections done by the industry, there was a 99% compliance rate. However, when they are overseen by a USDA inspector, that compliance rate goes down to about 94%. Stated another way, 78% of the violations that the industry inspectors found during the 2012 show year were found when USDA was present, even though they are at less than 10% of the show.
Right, right. Well, you know, I don't see why people will be opposed to this legislation. This legislation simply says we'll have independent inspectors trained by USDA, hired by the shows, and it's not even mandatory that the shows hire those inspectors. If they don't hire those inspectors, then they're going to be subject to more penalties. But, Mr. Irby, do you object to independent inspectors trained by the Department of Agriculture and veterinarians on top of that?
No, absolutely not. I am 100% in favor of the USDA licensing the inspectors as the bill provides and doing away with the self-regulation system, because in 40 years we've proven that we cannot do it, and I believe that's the only way that a truly sound horse will be able to be put in.
And Mr. DeHaven, do you support the legislation in that sense?
Indeed, I do. I think it addresses the self-policing problem. It also narrowly focuses on the areas where the biggest problems are, the use of the pads and chains, which contribute to soaring.
Yeah, because when you also said there's no reason to have one of these on a horse unless he's been sored. Is that correct?
It provides an additional incentive to soar a horse.
Right.
If you have created an injury on that horse's pastern by the practice of soaring, and now you're going to have a change, strike that, you are going to get a much greater reaction than if that animal had not been sored. And so by removing the change, you remove much of the incentive to even soar that horse to begin with.
Now, Tennessee walking horses are showed in a lot of places around the country. We have 12 or 13 IHOs or HIOs, and I'm sad to say that the problem does seem to be in the Shelbyville, Tennessee area, parts of Kentucky where Pride has been, and parts of Missouri. Those seem to be the three problem areas. Would you agree with that, Mr. Irby?
Yes, sir, I would. It's a majority in the southeast, but those three are the top three areas.
And what about you, Mr. DeHaven? Would you agree with that?
I would agree, and that's where the concentration of the big leg horses is.
And Mr. Bennett, whom I've met with and who I enjoy being with, and is a personal fellow, and I'm sure he does a great job, but he's been very much involved with the show HIO, and we have the letter from the Department of Agriculture saying that they're notifying them that they're going to decertify their program. And we have another letter, unfortunately, that applies to the Kentucky HIO, Pride, and another letter to the Missouri. So this program is working, this industry is working well without using soaring or action devices in many parts of the country. But in this one geographical area, because of self-policing, in my humble opinion, it's not working. And that's why we introduced the legislation.
And I would agree with that. I'm sorry.
Your time has expired, and now recognize the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Guthrie.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Guthrie, would you just yield 1 minute?
Yeah, I'll yield to my friend as much time as
No, I just wanted to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record the documents that I gave you all yesterday. We referred to certain websites, and then also a letter from the ASPCA supporting the legislation.
All those documents were submitted to us and to the other side. There's no objections.
And
they are
Marion Yoho of who's a member of Congress from Florida, his letter about the legislation.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. Johnson from Tennessee, and I'm sorry, I had to step to another committee hearing, so you may have answered this. I know the one question I was going to ask you did get to, but you talked about the effect of this bill on the industry in Tennessee. I'm from Kentucky, just north of, I'm in Bowling Green, so I'm just a few miles from the Tennessee border, and I understand Shelbyville, I know that area. But you talk about how it's going to affect the industry in that area. And so my question is it bad actors or is it widespread? That's one thing that's kind of hard to get out of all the information I've tried to receive. It's one group saying it's just a handful of bad actors. There's a handful saying it's widespread. Then you see investigations where just a handful of horses are found, and then you see when the USDA comes, they said 52 out of 52 were found, and so it's difficult to come up with exactly what's your opinion? Is it bad actors or is it widespread?
What I have testified to here today is the impact it would have on Tennessee's economy, Tennessee rural communities, Tennessee charities that depend on these horse shows for their charitable contributions and fundraising for the year. For the young people that are involved in these organizations of showing horses and so forth, the caring of animals in a proper way, the training of the animal in a proper way, it's a great tool for raising kids with. It's a great activity for families to build their family around. Now, I'm not an expert in other areas that deal with whether it's the bad apple or whether it's widespread. That's for folks with more tools than I have available to me. But I can tell you that it will be devastating to eliminate the big leg horse, the performance horse, from being showed. And I think, in all due respect, Chairman, Mr. Representative Whitfield, that your bill does much more than what you've described to this committee, and that's my concern. It does, I think it will change the industry around this country tremendously, and I don't have the details to go into that. But
if it doesn't just prevent soaring, then I mean, my question is preventing soaring is what's going to hurt the Tennessee economy, or having this method of preventing soaring?
Having this method.
And why is it more? I mean, I'm just trying to get information. I really am. Why? Unless you want, I can yield to my friend. You want to follow up? Oh, because he brought you into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're talking about independent inspectors here, and we're talking about removing action devices and preventing soaring. Other than that, how is that going to hurt your economy so much?
Well, the folks that I depend on tell me, and I don't have all the details there, that I'd be glad to furnish this after the fact if I could.
Sure.
But that it goes much, your bill goes much further than that and would eliminate really the performance horse.
Well, you know, one organization down there asked me some specific information about this bill. We sent them a letter explaining it in detail that it didn't do what they said, and they refused to put it on their website even. So I think there is some misinformation, but basically the bill provides independent inspectors, veterinarians trained by USDA. It gives the show the option of using those inspectors. If they don't use those inspectors and APHIS comes in and finds a violation, then there's pretty severe penalties. But it does eliminate soaring, and it eliminates the action devices like this, which Mr. DeHaven and others have said are not necessary unless you are soaring.
Could I interject?
Sure.
I agree. I think we need one HIO, okay? The thing that concerns me is you said that the show managers have an option if they don't want to use the veterinarian inspectors. If everybody in here is for the welfare of the horse, what worries me is start having shows that nobody knows about that no inspectors go to. And those bad actors that we got, if we don't get rid of them, they're going to show up there. And if we're after the welfare of the horse, I think we're creating an issue there that we haven't perceived yet. Yeah. The second thing I'd like to see is, I'm sorry.
Well, I just want the next question, because Mr. Johnson said a balanced approach, and I was leaving just as I think somebody asked you that, and you were going to give the balanced approach. I guess if the chairman's lenient. So how do you stop it then? I mean, if this bill is not a way to stop it, then what does stop it? Unless we're agreeing that soaring. I know you're not saying soaring.
No, let me answer that, but let me finish my train of thought with Dr. DeHaven and let him interject his opinion. But my opinion is and I'm all for one HIO. I'm all for licensed veterinarians looking at them. I am all for objective testing, and I am for getting rid of the soaring. But I worry that we will find enough accredited veterinarians that want to go to horse shows on Friday night that start at 6 and don't get over with till 2:30 in the morning, and then go back Saturday night and go through it again. Dr. DeHaven can answer that better than I can.
Do you want to respond, Mr. DeHaven, Dr. DeHaven? It's a preference anyway.
I think we'll only know the answer to that question if and when we're faced with that situation. Clearly, the AAEP, who represents several thousand equine practitioners, feel that that is feasible and the best solution. I think the worst-case scenario is that even if we didn't have veterinarians doing the inspection, as is the case now, at least they would be independent inspectors
and
trained and assigned by the Department of Agriculture and not an HIO.
Well, that's why, I mean, I do think it's significant that every veterinary
has...
I'll yield back my time. My 1.5 minute over.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield and Mr. Guthrie, and that no one else here to ask questions. So this will conclude our hearing. Now, under our rules, any of the members can submit questions to you, and it sounds like there's already to Commissioner Johnson, perhaps you mentioned that you wanted to supply. Please feel free to do that. Once you get those questions from us, if there's any questions to you, we request that within about 14 days that you comply and get those back to us. I'm not sure anyone's going to do that, but the rules allow that, and I want to let you know that you may get those written questions from the committee. With that, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here today and offering your expertise before us. It is extremely helpful to us to have your insights when we're dealing with pieces of legislation. So thank you for being here. And we are adjourned.